The Apostle John warned the elect of the deception of a ruler to come, and many like him that will receive their power from the prince of darkness. He said, Little children, it is the last time, and as you have heard that Antichrist shall come, even now are there many Antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time.
And I have to think back that if I were alive in the age I am now, knowing what I know now, in 1939, there was a man on the scene that I would have sworn was the Antichrist. And that man was none other than Adolf Hitler.
The Bible lays out that there will be 8 mystery kings before the Antichrist will arrive on the scene, the first being the leader of the Tower of Babel, Nimrod. Could the 7th king that would rule for just a short time, spoken of in the book of the Revelation, be Adolf Hitler? Is this why modern historians can't truly understand what happened in Nazi Germany and the life of Hitler? Could the heart of a man be the missing piece to unlocking the greatest tragedy of the 20th century and help us to prepare for an even darker time to come? The Bible says the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it?
We have to look at his heart. And see, that's where modern historians totally fail us, because they don't understand. They're looking at his actions, they're looking at his speech, okay, and the events surrounding Hitler, without considering his heart, without considering that his heart was molded by witchcraft, and he considered himself to be the Antichrist of the book of Revelation.
Thousands went to the Nuremberg rallies as skeptics and returned as dedicated worshippers of the Fuhrer. In a book entitled Secretaries of Death, the reality behind the intent of the concentration camps became clear. A survivor named Erka Annis wrote that one night in the middle of January 1945, she and several other female prisoners were ordered to work for 3 days removing about 6,000 huge urns containing ashes from a crematorium at Birkenau. The ashes were loaded onto trucks and removed from the camp just before the Nazis fled. As a final sacrifice to the powers of darkness, the SS scattered the ashes from the gas ovens and concentration camps across the length and breadth of the Reich.
What they were doing is they were offering a sacrifice of these Jews to their pagan gods to cleanse the soil. Remember, blood, Aryan blood, soil that was rightfully theirs, blood and soil religion, and they sacrificed 6 million people. 6 million souls sacrificed to cleanse the soil.
And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And I saw one of the heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast, and they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast. And there was given unto him a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies. And power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against Elohim. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds, and tongues, and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints.
The beast here that we are given in Revelation chapter 13 is the person, a real man, that will be known as the Antichrist. And we see him referred to as the Antichrist in other passages of Scripture.
The book of Revelation gives us a picture of this man to come as one who will conquer in the name of peace when he first arrives. And I saw and behold a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. But in the writings of the prophet Daniel, he is labeled as the great and awesome beast.
But we're talking about a real man, a real person, not a country, not a methodology, not a belief system, but a real person known as the Antichrist, who will rule the world with a one world government and a one world religion. And the Bible says he will prosper for 42 months. He'll actually rule for 7 years or 84 months, but the fact of the matter is he will prosper for 42 months or 3.5 years.
People have always pondered who the Antichrist will be and when he will take the world stage. Do we already have an example of what to look for in this man? The Bible tells us there will be 7 mystery kings before the arrival of the true Antichrist. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. The 7 kings are what has been labeled as the mystery kings.
The Bible talks about the fact that there will be 8 mystery kings in world history. And the last mystery king will be Antichrist. Now, a mystery king is a leader who holds 2 positions in his, in his country simultaneously. He is the absolute dictator, and he is the absolute top priest of the religion of that land.
At the time the Apostle John wrote the book of Revelation, the world was under the heel of the 6th mystery king, Nero of Rome. Prior to him, the world had 5 mystery kings, dating back to the first, Nimrod of Babylon. But after Nero, it has been said, no one has arose who fulfilled the unique role of mystery king until Adolf Hitler. Hitler was both the absolute dictator and the satanic high priest for the entire nation.
I do believe it. I believe he was the 7th mystery king. He was a mystery king, and there aren't that many of them in world history. He was the top dictator, and he was the top priestess of the Nazi religion that he installed in Germany.
Alice Bailey, in her book, The Externalization of the Hierarchy, writes that the Great One, the New Age Christ, will restore the ancient mysteries to outer expression, meaning that he will restore the ancient Satan worship to public practice. This is exactly what Hitler accomplished. Even today, occult practices have become more mainstream and accepted as the days of the Third Reich.
It says that the 7th mystery king shall last only a short time, okay? And then pass into history. But the 8th will be of the 7th. It means he's going to be identical to him, from the same bolt of cloth. He's going to have the same characteristic as the 7th. And of course, the 8th mystery king is Antichrist.
Now, we're told also in the book of Daniel a bit about the character of this man, and we see that he will magnify himself above all.
The character of this man would be a king of dark sentences. He will cause craft or deceit to prosper, and will honor the God of forces, and much more. But nevertheless, the agenda of this man to come will be to wear out the saints of the Most High. He will think to change times and laws, but by the peace he brings will destroy many, and the time will come when the whole earth will worship him, and during his reign will break the covenant once established.
And 2/3 of the Jews will be slaughtered or massacred. We will see a second Holocaust, or they will see a second Holocaust when the Antichrist comes to power. Now, we can ask, who is Antichrist? And I really don't want to spend an inordinate amount of time on trying to figure out who the Antichrist is. I mean, as Christians, as those that are born again, we really shouldn't be looking for the coming of Antichrist. We are listening for the trump of God and the shout of the archangel for the rapture of the church.
From secret societies to religions around the world, countless people are looking for a man to come, and more importantly, looking for a man to bring peace. The Toltec Indians are looking, the Buddhists and the New Agers are looking for Maitreya the Christ, and some believe he is here today. Freemasons are looking for Hiram Abiff, and others are looking as well, such as the Hindus, Islam, and the Jews, and even the Christians are looking for the return of Jesus Christ.
They're the Rosicrucians. They have chapters, secret chapters across America. The Theosophists, the Scientologists. There are all sorts of secret societies throughout the world and throughout America today. And the common goal is to create this one world government under a one world ruling elite. Eventually down the line, of course, to destroy Christianity and to install the one world leader. And of course, that one world leader, whether the people in these secret societies realize it or not, that one world leader will be the Antichrist.
Many princes and leaders of the world have been speculated as being the Antichrist alive today. Even some have wondered if President Obama is the one to come.
I'm here to tell you, folks, President Obama is not the Antichrist, but there are those that make him out to be the Antichrist. I have a good friend that will give you 1,000 reasons why this man, Bono, is the Antichrist, and that he is setting up a world system right now that he will eventually rule the world.
Although these men are not the Antichrist, however, one can say the spirit of Antichrist is at work through the lives, the minds, and the hearts of these people. As a people, we have forgotten the wisdom and instruction of Scripture. We have turned from looking at the hearts of men and begun judging by the appearance of the actions. For the Lord seeth not as man sees, for man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart.
Americans have to get to the position where we start choosing our leaders the way the Bible chooses their leaders. Do you remember when God sent Samuel to the sons of Jesse to pick the king, the future king? Samuel liked everyone. He thought every one of those boys was, good-looking, solid citizens, right? And he couldn't believe when the Lord says, no, that's not the one. And finally, the Lord said to Samuel, you look on the outside, I look on the inside, I look at the heart. And Christians today have to get back to looking at the heart of a leader to determine whether we're going to support him or not, whether we're going to cast our vote for him or not.
O generation of vipers, how can ye, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh. A good man out of the good treasure of the heart bringeth forth good things, and an evil man out of the evil treasure bringeth forth evil things. But as things wax worse and worse, the lines will become blurred in the eyes of men as the nations begin to openly proclaim evil as good and good as evil.
All actions, all speech flows from the heart. So, what molds a man's heart? His religious values. If you are a Christian, then your heart should be molded, should have been molded by Christian values, biblical values. If you're a Buddhist, well then you'll have a Buddhist mindset, a Buddhist heart.
As young Adolf Hitler was also spending much time in the public library, filling his mind with books on such varied subjects as ancient Rome, Eastern religions, yoga, occultism, hypnotism, and astrology. Many people today are not aware of the deeply occult, satanic basis that these religions and practices contain, and many parents are supporting their children's innocent pursuit into the practices forbidden by the Elohim of Scripture. These ideas can be traced back to the first mystery king, Nimrod, the great king of Babylon, from which the Bible clearly instructs us to come out of her. The heart from the very first mystery king is no mystery, for the book of Genesis tells us that Nimrod was a mighty hunter who wanted to battle against Yahweh and lead the people to build a city and a name for themselves, and would eventually become the head of nearly every false way or pagan worship that would kindle the anger of God.
We have to look at his heart. And see, that's where modern historians totally fail us, because they don't understand. They're looking at his actions, they're looking at his speech, okay, and the events surrounding Hitler, without considering his heart, without considering that his heart was molded by witchcraft, and he considered himself to be the Antichrist of the book of Revelation.
There really is a world occult movement. In fact, if you are certainly an evangelical Christian, as I am, you believe that Lucifer is the Lord of this world. And I believe that is true. I believe that all of the major forces in the world today, here in the United States, in Europe, and throughout much of Africa and Asia, are founded in the occult.
While many people deny the dark side of spirituality, it has been the goal of Lucifer to produce a counterfeit to every plan of God from the time of his rebellion.
Just as we have a Father and a Son and a Holy Ghost, the Holy Trinity, so we have the unholy Trinity, Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet.
With this unholy Trinity, Satan has been preparing in every generation to have a man ready to take his agenda to the world. Perhaps it was Hitler and his wicked heart that was developed by the powers behind witchcraft, an idea where most historians are not willing to go.
And I understand partly why historians so shy away from that, because to adequately understand Hitler, you have to understand black magic witchcraft. You have to understand what it teaches and what its goals are, and you have to understand how the spirits from the abyss, starting in 1899 when Hitler was born and culminating in 1945, their plan for Germany, their plan for the world, their plan for Hitler. Once you understand all that, then you'll begin to understand Adolf Hitler and his role in world history.
And until the American people understand that behind everything going on today are powerful occult forces intent upon creating a world government, until you understand that, nothing makes sense.
So there are a lot of theories, there are a lot of people that think the Antichrist is alive and well and walking the earth today. He may well be. And I have to think back that if I were alive in the age I am now, knowing what I know now, in 1939, there was a man on the scene that I would have sworn was the Antichrist. And that man was none other than Adolf Hitler.
Just as God laid out his prophets in the Old Testament to foreshadow the one to come, Jesus Christ, Nazi Germany had its prophets for its Antichrist. Those that preceded Hitler will guide our understanding that he himself didn't originate all the ideas that swept a nation. Franz Hartmann, known for the first German publication at this time to sport the theosophical swastika on its cover, known as the Lotus Blossom. It was Guido von List's racist writings after 1906 that owed much to the occult revival in Europe. In 1875, List had used the swastika as the centerpiece of a personal pagan rite, and later claimed it was a holy Aryan and German symbol of the old religion. He called for ruthless subjection of all non-Aryans and favored 1932 as a year a divine force would possess the collective consciousness of the German people and usher in the New Age, and the Aryan masters in a hierarchical state eagerly awaited a new messianic leader. Guido von List believed the mystical secrets of the universe could be revealed by deciphering rune symbols. The runes became an important part of the occult symbol language of National Socialism. For Guido von List, the swastika was the twice high holy secret of constant generation. He believed the universe was whisked into being by a Nordic god called Mundolfari. The swastika was the sun whisk, or the act of creation. According to Guido von List, Aryan superiority could be achieved by the union of pure males and females. Another prophet of Hitler and Ariosophy, Lanz von Liebenfels, promoted an Aryo-Christian doctrine. According to Liebenfels' theology, the fall simply denoted the racial compromise of the Aryans due to wicked interbreeding with lower animal species. The consequence of these persistent sins was the creation of several mixed races, which threatened the proper and sacred authority throughout the world, especially in Germany, where this race was most numerous.
In other words, he took the Bible and rewrote it and said, okay, the fall of man that's depicted in the Bible was actually a metaphor for Aryans interbreeding with animals. And this interbreeding resulted in the Jews. It really gets almost ludicrous.
Liebenfels' earliest books introduced the idea of theozoology, a new science inspired by H.P. Blavatsky's secret doctrine. Within his theozoology, he suggested that early Aryans committed bestiality with lower species, and this created a different branch of humanity, separate from the pure Aryans.
Now, Lebensborn communities were communities set up in the Third Reich where choice young women, very physically fit, very beautiful, blonde-haired and blue eyes, were put in these camps to breed Aryans, and men of pure Aryan stock were brought in to breed with these women. That as a result, you'd have to eliminate marriage and other values of Western Christianity, but that's exactly what they were doing. They were breeding, or trying to breed, the God-man. They carried social Darwinism to its logical conclusions.
Liebenfels, like many others of the time, took the Bible and perverted it into an Aryan document. The New Testament spoke of the coming Christ to redeem the chosen Aryan race, and the disposal of racial inferiors was a sacrifice to God, and he felt that World War I represented the messianic fullness of time. Dietrich Eckart, one of the most famous prophets of Hitler, and the one whom initiated Adolf Hitler into the occult. Hitler wrote of him in the last sentence of Mein Kampf. He was one of the best who devoted his life to the awakening of our people, in his writing, in his thoughts, and finally, in his deeds.
And he actually met Adolf Hitler in 1919, and of course indoctrinated him in this whole idea of bringing about a world occult movement. Dietrich Eckart was deeply involved with the occult. He transmitted many of these ideas to Adolf Hitler, and as a result, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi movement were founded in the occult.
He believed himself to be the reincarnation of Bernard of Barcelona. He was reputed to have held the Carolingian armies at bay using black magic powers. Another important name under the Nazi movement would be Count Heinrich von Sebottendorf, the actual founder of the Tool-Gesellschaft. Sebottendorf and another member of this inner group of the Tool-Gesellschaft predicted that latent powers slumbering in the blood of the Aryan race would unfold in the 20th century under Adolf Hitler. Superman would then appear, they believed, awakening the Germanic people to the glories of the ancient heritage. Sebottendorf was the author of a book titled Before Hitler Came, The Early Years of the Nazi Movement.
So you see here that we have proof of people that prepared the way for Hitler and prepared the hearts and minds of the German people by introducing occult, Luciferian, satanic thoughts and ideas into the psyche of an entire nation.
Karl Maria Williget will become the best friend of Heinrich Himmler and was given the official assignment for prehistorical research in the SS between 1933 and 1939. Williget claimed to possess ancestral clairvoyant memory, which enabled him to recall the history and experiences of his tribe over thousands of years. Williget believed that Germany was originally settled in 228,000 BC by people from the lost continent of Atlantis. He insisted that the Bible was much older than anyone thought, that the events of the New Testament had taken place in Germany and not Palestine, and that Jesus Christ was really Christ, an avatar who had founded the Erminist religion in 12,500 BC. The Williget family were supposed to be sages of Erminism who were driven into the northern European wilderness by rival sorcerers in 1200 BC. These ideas fit the increasing popularity of the theory of evolution. But in 1924, Williget would be committed to the Salzburg Mental Asylum and certified insane. The full report on his condition referred to his violence at home, including threats to kill his wife, grandiose projects, eccentric behavior, and occult interest, before diagnosing a history of schizophrenia involving megalomaniac and paranoid delusions. A Salzburg court ruled him incompetent to administer his own affairs on the basis of this medical evidence. He would be released in 1927, and in September of 1933, at a conference of the Nordische Gesellschaft, Williget was inducted into the SS to head a department for pre- and early history, which was created for him within the SS race and settlement, the main office.
What a joke. What a farce. Here is a man that was declared legally insane and certified. He was certified insane in 1924, and in 8 years later, he was appointed the head of a government bureau. Sounds like some people in Washington, doesn't it? I mean, really, this is how absolutely ludicrous things have gotten in the Third Reich.
In Himmler's quest to find ancient artifacts to support his beliefs in pagan occultic Ariosophy, he believed in Williget's ability to recall ancient history to lead him to the answers he needed. Houston Stewart Chamberlain, the man who cunningly united Wagner's racist doctrines with Nietzsche's concept of the coming Superman in order to create the dream of an Aryan master race. Chamberlain would declare Adolf Hitler to be the long-awaited German Messiah. He also declared that Jesus was not a Jew, but an Aryan, and it was from Chamberlain and his mentor and father-in-law, Wagner, that would lead to the diagrams and texts which imply that Jews are members of an inferior race. This greatly influenced Nazi decisions and helped precipitate the Holocaust. It should come as no surprise that Chamberlain was controlled by demons. William Shirer, who wrote The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, which has become a classic on the subject of Nazi Germany, said that Houston Stewart Chamberlain was given to seeing demons, who by his own account drove him relentlessly to seek new fields of study and get on with his prodigious writing. His writings from the foundations of the 19th century would be revered as the gospel of the Nazi movement, and he went to his grave with high hopes that all he had preached and prophesied would yet come true under the divine guidance of this new German Messiah, Adolf Hitler. My faith in Germanism has not wavered for an instant, though my hope, I confess, was at a low ebb. With one stroke you have transformed the state of my soul, that in the hour of her deepest need, Germany gives birth to a Hitler, proves her vitality, as so the influences that emanate from him. For these two things, personality and influence, belong together. May God protect you. These are just a few men of many that would be the heralds of the German Messiah and the prophets of Ariosophy, an idea founded on secret religious orders dedicated to the revival of lost esoteric knowledge, the racial virtue of the ancient Germans, and the creation of a new pan-German empire.
Here's what it is. You take the Grail legends as depicted here with Mary Magdalene. You take what was German Catholicism. You add to it the Ehrenvolk, or the Volk, or the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryans, and you end up with Nazi Christians who ultimately would turn from the cross to the swastika. As a matter of fact, here on top we see the Deutsch Christian emblem, which is the same as the Nazi flag, with a cross with a swastika in the middle. And so that's what happened to Christianity in Germany.
Just as in the book, The Revelation, the beast has his false prophet, so did Adolf Hitler, the high priest of Ariosophy, Heinrich Himmler. Himmler's personal agenda was to amass enough data, archaeological, historical, cultural, religious, and occult, to prove that the Aryan race was superior to all other races on Earth, and that the Germans were the inheritors of the Aryan bloodline. He also had to prove that at some point in history, what are now the German peoples owned virtually all the real estate in Europe. This would not only seem to legitimize Hitler's drive to the east, but might prove useful in establishing that the Germans had a historical right to do whatever they wanted with whatever inferior mongrel races they found there.
Hitler and Himmler were really in the 30s. They really went all out to find these certain artifacts that they just knew were in these old civilizations like Egypt.
Patrick French, in a review of the book Himmler's Crusade, wrote, he believed in the lost kingdom of Atlantis, in pagan rituals involving fir sprigs and holly, in the martial virtues of Hinduism, and in the world ice theory, which claims the early ancestors of the Aryans had been frozen in ice until their release by divine thunderbolts. Christopher Hale makes the point in this book that historians have often viewed Himmler's occult obsessions as exotic marginalia in a life otherwise dedicated to efficient policing and ruthless genocide.
They keep talking about the Holy Grail, and most of them think of it as a chalice, like the chalice from which Jesus drank during the Last Supper. And that's one explanation, and it's valid. But the real Holy Grail is Antichrist. The pursuit of the Holy Grail is the pursuit of Antichrist.
The truth is that Himmler's enthusiasm about lost civilizations, prehistoric archaeology, the Holy Grail, and especially the origins of the Indo-Germanic races were intricately interwoven with the racial theories that demanded the elimination of the unfit, otherwise known as eugenics.
You got to realize, folks, that in the 1930s and in the 1940s, there were other people, very notable people in the world, that shared Himmler and Hitler's ideas on eugenics, not necessarily on Ariosophy, not necessarily just for the Aryans, but eugenics in general, which taught of a superior race and the elimination of minor unfit races or the unfit. And let's call a few names. Henry Ford, of Ford Motor Company fame. He was big time into eugenics. Winston Churchill, Prime Minister of Great Britain, big time into eugenics. And many people in the United States embraced Nazi Germany because of their philosophy of eugenics and because they saw the minority races as a threat to their way of life, rightfully so probably, but that's the case, and they were out to eliminate them.
Himmler would take over Wewelsburg Castle that was built in 1603, and it would become the place where he could put in motion all his ideas and become the home of the SS to perform their pagan rites and rituals where the sacred Aryan marriages would be held. Himmler planned to announce that Wewelsburg Castle was the center of the world. Starting in 1934, Himmler led the construction of a Nazi Vatican, with Wewelsburg Castle to be the equivalent of the Vatican St. Peter's Basilica. The SS organization had been constituted by Himmler according to the principles of the Jesuits' order. The regulations and spiritual exercises prescribed by Ignatius of Loyola were the model Himmler tried to copy exactly. Himmler's title as Supreme Chief of the SS was to be the equivalent of the Jesuits' general, and the whole structure of the direction was a close imitation of the Catholic Church's hierarchical order. He saw the castle as both the center of the current and coming new world. It was the Nazi Camelot. In his deepest imaginations, he was creating a new knighthood in memory of King Arthur and others. Referred to by Villiget himself, the castle and its surroundings helped to tie the Germanic people to the ever-distant culture of the Celts, a society known for their dark practices. Himmler wanted his darkest secrets, artifacts, and rituals to stay hidden. In desperation as the war was coming to a close, he transferred most of the relics and was willing to torch the fortress. Ariosophists founded secret religious orders dedicated to the revival of lost esoteric knowledge and racial virtue of the ancient Germans and the creation of a new pan-German empire, a German empire that stretched all the way from the Atlantic Ocean to the Middle or Far East. Blavatsky taught that Atlantis existed 4.5 million years ago. The Aryans were led out of this Atlantis by Manu. Also, according to Blavatsky, Atlantis 4.5 million years ago sank into the Atlantic Ocean, and out of this Atlantis civilization came forth the Aryan subrace, and then from the Aryans came the Teutonic subrace, and from the Teutons came the German master race, and from that would come the Übermensch, or in the English, the Superman. This is what Adolf Hitler, Heinrich Himmler, and the Third Reich were trying to breed, the God-Man.
They felt that the Superman would evolve from the most advanced subrace of the Aryans, the Teutonic race. So that's where they get the idea that the Germans, in spite of the fact that they are Aryans in Persia, the Iranians are Aryans. The Indian people in India are Aryan. If you look at this language group and you embrace the whole idea, the Indians would be Aryans. The Iranians, the Persians would be Aryans. Other Europeans would be Aryans. But they felt that the Teutonic subrace of the Aryan race was the most advanced, so therefore that part of the race would create the Superman.
The societies that taught Ariosophy long before the rise of Hitler come with a great deal of controversy. Some of the organizations include the Tool Society and the Vril, the German Orden, and the Armanen League.
I don't think when Hitler came to power, when he started his drive to power in the 1920s, he could not have gained the traction among the German people that he gained had they not been prepared for the previous 40 years
Hitler didn't come on the scene and start preaching and teaching Blavatsky's doctrines and convert an entire nation. That wasn't what happened at all. There were other organizations that existed back in the 19th century even that brought this idea to the forefront, so the German people were well prepared for an Aryan Messiah to come because they'd been taught Ariosophy for a long time.
The Tool Society, Tool, the northernmost land discovered by Pithys. Tool, like Atlantis, was an island that disappeared in the northern Atlantic. Rudolf von Schippendorf, an important figure in the activities of the Tool Society, a practitioner of meditation, astrology, numerology, and alchemy.
The inner core of the members of the Tool Society were nothing more than black magic Satanists. Now, we're not talking about Wiccans. We're not talking about white magic witches here. We're talking about black magic worshippers of Lucifer.
The inner core of the Tool Society was an amalgam of Eastern religion, theosophy, anti-Semitism, Grail romance, and Nordic paganism, all which formed the philosophy of the Tool Society. In 1918, the Tool had 1,500 members in Bavaria. The members of the Tool Society believed that the lost civilization of the Teutons had possessed psychic abilities that were far beyond the technical achievements of the 20th century. They hoped to rediscover the secrets of this legendary civilization through occult practices.
Well, the Tool Society is a black magic satanic covenant, and they did human sacrifice as well. But they believed and they taught that mankind should be forced into a system of a one world government, a one world religion, and a one world economy, and would be presided over by a one world Messiah, okay? Which is what we call now the New World Order. And to achieve those goals, they practiced really dark black magic.
What was their goal? Why, it was a world government. What is the goal of the people who control the United States? They want a world government.
The inner core of the Tool were Satanists who practiced black magic, a very prominent organization that led to German Ariosophy across an entire population. New Age author Bill Cooper gives us a great insight when he states that each major country has an organization in the global satanic network of secret societies called the Brotherhood of Death Societies. In America, the Brotherhood of Death Society is Skull and Bones. The German Brotherhood of Death Society was known as the Tool Society. In other words, Skull and Bones is identical to the Tool Society. An adept of the Brotherhood of Death Society is so mentally changed that his mind becomes very divided into distinctly different compartments. This compartmentalization is how an adept can appear in public to be so normal, just as the Bible declares having two horns like a lamb, but roaring like a dragon. This prophetic description is of the false prophet, but accurately describes any practitioner of black magic Satanism. The false prophet is prophesied to look like a born-again Christian having two horns like a lamb, even though he has a heart of a dragon, Satan. Now this information is critically important, for Adolf Hitler was trained in the deepest, darkest aspects of black magic Satanism by the Tool Society. But however, Prescott Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush, and the latest George W. Bush were all subjected to the same rituals and many of the same life-shattering experiences as was Adolf Hitler. The Bushes are all members of Skull and Bones. The Vril Society, made up of the Vril Maidens, a common render of the name means like God. The Vril Society, known as the All-German Society for Metaphysics, was formed in 1921 to explore the origins of the Aryan race. The Vril was primarily composed by a group of female psychic mediums. led by the Thule Gesellschaft medium Maria Orsic, who claimed to have received communication from Aryan aliens living on Alpha Tauri in the Aldebaran system in the Tarsus constellation 65 million light years away. It is said that whoever becomes master of the Vril will be master of himself, of others around him, and of the world. This society was headed up by psychic women to research into the Aryan bloodline. The Germanenorden was a Volkish secret society in early 20th century Germany. It was founded in Berlin in 1912 by Theodor Fritsch and several prominent German occultists. The sect met to celebrate the summer solstice, an important neo-pagan festivity in Volkish circles and later in Nazi Germany, and more regularly to read the Eddas, as well as some of the German mystics. In addition to occult and magical philosophies, it taught to its initiates nationalist ideologies of Nordic racial superiority and anti-Semitism, then rising throughout the Western world, as was becoming increasingly typical of Volkish organizations. It required its candidates to prove that they had no non-Aryan bloodlines and required from each a promise to maintain purity of his stock in marriage. The Germanenorden was another organization looking into the descent of the Aryan bloodline.
Interesting thing about the German Orden, their symbol was the swastika. So you see, the swastika came to light long before World War II and the Third Reich. The swastika was a revered symbol. As a matter of fact, Madame Blavatsky talked about in reverence of the swastika as a symbol. And we see the swastika in Tibet. We see the swastika in Hinduism as a symbol for happiness and peace and other things. But the swastika became the occult symbol of the Third Reich.
Yet another prominent organization was known as the Artenmannen League, a German agrarian and Volkish movement dedicated to a blood and soil inspired ruralism. Active during the interwar period, the League became closely linked to and eventually absorbed by the Nazi Party. The cult utopians, the Artenmannen League, demanded that German peasants be sent to colonize the lands to the east and sweep away the Asiatic and Jewish races. Out of blood and soil would spring a new German empire.
What they wanted to do in Germany was move their population to the east, and they were going to expand the German Empire with the Volk, V-O-L-K. You know, the Volkswagen, the people's wagon, the people, the Volk were the common people, the peasants of the land of Germany, where the German hierarchy felt that their power resided.
Most people recognize the organization of the SS from a military perspective, but the SS was originally formed as a personal bodyguard to Hitler and numbered around 300 when Heinrich Himmler joined. But when he rose to his leadership in 1929, things changed. 4 years later, membership had soared to 52,000. SS officers were discouraged from participating in Christian ceremonies including weddings and christenings, and celebrated the winter solstice instead of Christmas. The traditional day of gift exchange was switched to the day of the summer solstice celebration. Lavenda writes these ceremonies were replete with sacred fires, torchlit processions, and invocations of Teutonic deities, all performed by files of young blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan supermen. The SS, as well as the Germanenorden, had to prove Aryan blood at least 3 generations back, to prove they were of true Aryan stock. From the SS came what is known as the Ananarby, and they received a mandate to pursue research into German prehistory and archaeology. The Ananarby was subsequently incorporated into the SS. research indicated that Aryans had conquered everything east of the Rhine to the Chinese border. If they could prove Aryan racial superiority through their anthropological experiments at Dachau, that would justify in their own minds their extermination of subhumans, meaning non-Aryans.
They were carrying out experiments on human beings to prove Aryan superiority. They were taking measurements of the head, measurements of the body, measurements of the face, taking dead people, pulling their brains out, weighing their brains to prove that the Aryan race was a superior race. And oh, by the way, at Dachau, most of the inferiors they were studying were Jewish. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But they felt that everyone that was not Aryan was subhuman. And so therefore their experiments were leading to the justification of exterminating everyone that could not prove an Aryan lineage.
At this time in history, we see the rise in Aryan supremacy. Used prolifically across Nazi Germany was the Nazi flag. The red signified blood of the party, and the white signified national strength and purity, and the swastika reminded everyone of the mortal struggle for the victory of Aryan men over the forces of Jewry and Marxism. Aryan supremacy meant to the people a German national identity. Searching for lost Aryans or the Holy Grail or Atlantis may seem harmless enough, but German occultism was founded on a racial vision of history. Christian Hale, in his book Himmler's Crusade, concludes that it validated German national identity by conjuring up a bogus yet seductive ancestral past. By taking this chimerical past literally, men like Heinrich Himmler were able to infuse policies of racial purification with an irresistible potency. As a result, occultism facilitated murder. The ground loam of pseudo-Darwinian civilization led the scientists of the SS to the killing fields of the concentration camps. And the people would buy into this lie. But the Bible makes it clear who is the father of lies and who is behind the dark forces that drive the likes of Hitler and Himmler. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar, and the father of it. And the people bought into the lie that they would be the super race, the God-men, and they would follow the fanatical leader that is Adolf Hitler. Hitler said only the Aryan race can take part in the great heroic adventure of the sudden magical leg and the progress of human evolution.
And that's what they felt that they could accomplish if they could annihilate or exterminate everyone that wasn't Aryan. They felt that within 2 generations or less, everyone on earth would be God-men ruling the world.
The dictator of Germany, Adolf Hitler, rose to power in 1933 and ruled till his supposed death in 1945. We have to realize that there was so much more behind the Third Reich than what meets the eye. And what begins to bring this fact into focus is how similar the characteristics of the coming Antichrist fits to the person of Adolf Hitler.
Now we have to understand that when Hitler came to power, he was touting the doctrines of Nietzsche, of the coming of the Superman, the coming of the God-man, just like the New Age movement started doing in the 1970s and the 1980s. They were teaching that man was evolving to the next phase of evolution to the God-man. Well, Adolf Hitler believed the same thing. And in Nazi Germany, the general population embraced the thought of a coming Superman. But the interesting thing about Nazi Germany was that their people were teaching, even before Hitler, that the Superman would come from the German people. Specifically, the Superman would come from the Teutonic line of the Aryan race, which then became the German race. Well, this is really out in left field somewhere. We start asking the question, where could this whole idea come from? What is the Aryan race? Where did it come from? And why was a whole nation so sold on the fact that the God-man, that they were going to become God-men and women, that this master race existed on earth? How did they get so sold on that fact that they would follow a crazy man like Adolf Hitler? Because that, from the outsider's perspective and from the outsider's view, that's the way he appeared. He appeared to be a raving lunatic. But here we had, in the 1930s, and we're not talking about the Middle Ages, we're not talking about the 1200s, the 1300s, or the 1400s. We're talking about the 1920s, the 1930s, and the 1940s in a modern, industrialized, educated, mechanized world.
Many people have wondered why the masses would follow such a man that boldly stated, "Man is becoming God, man is God in the making." The same people would also fall to a man's claim that there was a super race or Superman, an idea that can be traced back to Friedrich Nietzsche, who contended that mankind must strive to adopt a master morality since the God of the Bible had been proven irrelevant. If this is the case, it remains to be determined and unclear who would produce the measuring rod of right and wrong. Friedrich Nietzsche also said that God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. Was this Hitler's agenda to call for the Aryan race to take their rightful place as gods?
Hitler followed that philosophy, and the German people followed that philosophy. But they taught that the Superman would come from a bloodline called the Aryan bloodline of the Aryan race.
In 1888, Helena Blavatsky would write the book that will become the central source for Hitler on the origins of the Aryan race in her magnus opus, The Secret Doctrine, that would alter the course of history to this present day, the synthesis of science, religion, and philosophy. It was an influential example of the revival of interest in esoteric and occult ideas in the modern age, in particular because of its claim to reconcile ancient Eastern wisdom with modern science. Hitler particularly found Blavatsky's teachings to be crucial to his satanic doctrines and was fascinated by Blavatsky's book. It was from this that he created the basis for his coming Holocaust. Her book covered topics such as the existence of Atlantis, extraterrestrial life forms, creation of animals by humans, a caste system of races, the importance of ancient alphabets such as runes in particular, the superiority of Aryans, the initiated version of astrology and astronomy, cosmic truths colored with pagan myth, and the occult significance of the swastika. To the Germans of the 1930s, the Secret Doctrine appeared to reconcile science and belief, nature and myth, and catalyzed a much older intellectual tradition. As in the Secret Doctrine itself, science and occultism lay happily side by side in a fetid embrace.
So they saw the Secret Doctrine as something that made sense of the world.
And Madame Blavatsky was a woman deeply involved in the occult who founded the Theosophical Society in about 1871 or 1872. And basically she was very closely affiliated with the other occultists at that time. But her organization, Theosophy, certainly based upon her books, The Secret Doctrine, which she wrote several volumes. And The Secret Doctrine, if you read it, you understand that she was certainly a tool of Lucifer. She openly writes about how Lucifer was God, and that certainly if you tapped into this source There was tremendous power there that could alter your whole outlook on the world, and you'd get great wealth and power and fame, which she had herself accomplished.
Hitler kept a copy of Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine by his bedside ever since being introduced to its teachings by Dietrich Eckart and Karl Haushofer.
A Satanist believes that any object created for any satanic use, okay, once it's created, whether it be wood or sculpture or a painting or a drawing on the ground or a book, once that book is created for Satan's purpose and is in existence, that begins to be a conduit for demonic spirits from the other realm. It will just reverberate with satanic power, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's their belief. That's why we've got all these satanic images sitting in Washington, D.C. The founders believed that once they were created and they're on the ground or they're in a painting or a sculpture, that they would begin to reverberate satanic power 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and gradually move America and the world into this new world order. Was taking that Secret Doctrine book at home, into bed with him, he was experiencing that demonic power flowing through that object, flowing through that book. And I really do believe it happens just like that. Because we're talking about the realm of Satanism here. We're not talking, it's not biblical, but it's an experience, or it's a fact in the demonic realm.
Germany found itself after World War I desperate to embrace anything that would reconcile its state of existence.
Here in the world of the 1930s, the late 1920s and the 1930s, the nation of Germany had just gone through a cataclysmic event with World War I. When the Allied nations called for the last payment on their debt, their economy fell completely apart. They had inflation that was absolutely unheard of in the history of mankind.
When the Nazis came to power in 1933, Germany was destitute. They didn't have any money. Their military, the army was totally inadequate.
It was a bad situation, but also we had the rise of Darwinism on the scene.
It was in the 1920s that evolution was being pushed to the forefront of human consciousness, and Germany, that once was known for its rich Christian history, where Martin Luther nailed his 95 Thesis 400 years earlier, was now ready to fully embrace Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. It would be this idea that would be the fuel to give rise to Hitler, and it is this view that's now mandated in all public forms of education in America. Richard Weikart, in his book From Darwin to Hitler, claims Darwinian ideology is the core of Nazism, and D. James Kennedy concludes, to put it simply, no Darwin, no Hitler. But there are those in contrast that contend, like Brett Carroll, that scientific theories, even those like Darwin's, that address organic life, are morally neutral. But are they naive and blind to the fact that every worldview shapes each individual's moral compass? Someone with an evolutionary viewpoint is going to be in stark contrast with someone that believes in a literal creation as accounted in the book of Genesis. One would lead to ultimate racism, and the other would teach that all humanity is of one blood. In the conclusion of From Darwin to Hitler, Weikart writes, Darwinism by itself did not produce the Holocaust, but without Darwinism, especially in its social Darwinist and eugenics permutations, neither Hitler nor his Nazi followers would have had the necessary scientific underpinnings to convince themselves and their collaborators that one of the world's greatest atrocities was really morally praiseworthy. Darwinism, or at least some naturalistic interpretation of Darwinism, succeeded in turning morality on its head. Many want to ignore that Hitler was simply carrying out evolution to its logical conclusion. To advance to the next stage of evolution, one would have to do away with the unfit.
So most of the German population was either Catholic or Lutheran. And then here comes evolution. And all of a sudden they learn that man is nothing more than an animal. A man is a creature that evolved from a single amoeba or from a monkey, or ever how you want to put it, and they couldn't reconcile that. But they looked at Madame Blavatsky and her secret doctrine and all these wild and crazy ideas, and it, in a way, it reconciled and brought life into focus for them, especially when they had a man leading the charge that was touting these ideas.
Blavatsky based her writings on the myth of Atlantis, and Plato's myth of Atlantis. Plato related that the priest of Isis relayed to the poet Solon the ancestry of the Aryan race. H.P. Blavatsky was given the secret doctrine by the masters of wisdom through telepathy, otherwise known as automatic writing. In the same way, Alice Bailey was given the teachings by Joao Cole. They were channeled by spirit entities that posed as benevolent creatures to advance mankind.
This source of this book was straight from the pits of hell, to put it in a Christian perspective. So therefore, if the priest of Isis gave this information to Solon, it was from the same source, because the priest of Isis were nothing more than those that relayed demonic thoughts and ideas.
This is all based on the notion that Atlantis had 7 root races. The secret doctrine maintains that 7 races originated in Atlantis, and that one of the 7 were the Aryans. Although there were supposedly 6 other Atlantean races, Blavatsky tells us that the Aryans were the master race, or supermen, of the Atlantean races. She writes, "They did not become supermen by ordinary evolution or mutation. They took a quantum leap upward in order to give them the necessary faculties to live in the post-Diluvian world. While losing some qualities that were coveted, such as magical powers over the forces of nature and psychic development, they gained faculties of brain development and superior intelligence over the other surviving races, who were supposedly inferior in blood stock and mental faculties." According to Blavatsky, Manu, one of the last of the god-men, escorted the Aryan race out of Atlantis because the Aryan race had the capability to evolve into god-men. There are varying beliefs about who the Aryans really are. In the book Unholy Alliance we find, according to science, there is no such thing as the Aryan race. Peter Levenda goes on to suggest that the term Aryan refers to a language group and not a race of people. There is no such thing, yet this is exactly the type of reasoning that led the early Aryan promoters into one of the worst blunders of 20th century history. So, where did this idea come from that swept the minds of the people of Germany? As the people at the time were desperately searching for meaning, Charles Darwin and his book, when it was first published, almost failed, but now was a time that the people were ready and willing to accept his message. Very few know the entire title of his work. The full title reads, "On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life." Is it a coincidence that Hitler titled his book Mein Kampf, or My Struggle?
Evolution was not only a dumb idea, not only a false theory, but it was also dangerous, and it was racist. And that's what really triggered this whole thought of the Aryan race, was Darwin's theory of evolution and the preservation of favored races, and in the mind of the German people, the Aryan race. So we see the Aryan bloodline. If you take the basic tenets of evolution, add to that the theories of Atlantis, and we add to that not basic Gnosticism, which is basically where Blavatsky's religion lay. The common Gnostic themes are Persian dualism, the struggle of good and evil as independent battling principles, and also the idea that the material world is utterly evil. You know, the Gnostics can't accept Jesus Christ as God, although you have people that call themselves Gnostic Christians or Coptic Christians. They can't accept the fact that Jesus Christ is God. The reason for that is Jesus Christ was God in the flesh, and God became man according to the Word of God, according to the Bible. But the Gnostics say all material is evil. That means your skin, your body, everything in the material world is evil. So how then could God inhabit evil? And according to them, that God could not inhabit a body, because the body is material and the God is evil. So therefore, there's no way Jesus Christ was God. And that is where all this idea of the Da Vinci Code and all the other things that came to light about the fact that Jesus was not God. He faked his crucifixion. He married Mary Magdalene, had children. All of that came from the Gnostic Gospels. But basically, if you take that theme, combine it with Darwinism, combine it with Atlantis, combine it with Norse mythology. Here we have a picture of Odin. Odin gave one eye to gain wisdom. He was the god of war and the all-father of the gods of Valhalla in Norse mythology. And you add to that Blavatsky's theosophy, and you end up, if you add all of those things together, you end up with German Ariosophy. Of course, Ariosophy, that's the word Aryan, and so the belief in the Aryan race.
Dietrich Eckart met Adolf Hitler when Hitler gave a speech before party members in 1919. The Tool Society was a secretive group of occultists who believed in the coming of a German Messiah who would redeem Germany after its defeat in World War I. Eckart expressed his anticipation in a poem he wrote months before he first met Hitler. In the poem, Eckart refers to the Great One, the Nameless One, whom all can sense, but no one saw. When Eckart met Hitler, Eckart was convinced that he had encountered the prophesied Redeemer. This German Messiah was the one who would go forth conquering and to conquer. This became evident with Hitler's fascination with the Spear of Destiny, the occult power behind the spear which pierced the side of Christ, and how Hitler inverted the force in a bid to conquer the world.
And the belief grew up about the spear that he who controls the Spear of Destiny controls the world. And if you lose the Spear of Destiny, you're going to lose your control of either your government or the world. And so Hitler believed that with all his heart.
All holders of the Spear of Destiny, except Hitler, were in the Grell family. Constantine once held the spear, and Theodosius in 385. Charles Martel carried the spear at Tours in 732 AD, and Charlemagne in the year 800. Frederick Barbarossa died when he dropped the spear in 1190. German chronicles in Cologne indicate that Longinus, from the biblical account that pierced the side of Christ, was of German extraction. The spear had passed like the very finger of destiny through the millennium, forever creating new patterns of fate which had again and again changed the entire history of Europe. According to the legend associated with the spear of Longinus, the claimant to this talisman of power has a choice between the service of two opposing spirits and the fulfillment of his world historic aims, a good and an evil spirit. Walter Stein reported that while in front of the spear, an alien entity entered Hitler, and Hitler stood before the spear and made an irreversible vow to worship evil. Hitler said himself about the account, "The air became so stifling, I could hardly breathe. The noisy scene of the treasure house seemed to melt away before my eyes. I stood alone trembling before the hovering form of the Superman, a spirit sublime and furtive, a countenance intrepid and cruel. In holy awe I offered my soul as a vessel of his will.
At that point, if this account is true, Adolf Hitler was possessed probably by Lucifer himself.
But it was also said that Hitler's soul life was not mature enough at that moment to maintain an awareness of himself and his surroundings when this alien entity entered him. During the following 6 months, during a series of irregular meetings and discussions with Hitler, Walter Stein was to witness a maturing soul development in this enigmatic character, through which he became more and more a conscious and a responsive tool of the world-shattering purposes of the demonic spirit which overshadowed him. "I move like a sleepwalker where providence dictates," said Adolf Hitler at a press interview.
You and I as Christians know that this spear is not the historical spear that pierced Christ. I mean, the chances of it being the actual spear is like, a couple of million to 1 against it, I suppose. But, Hitler said, truth is not what is, truth is what people perceive it to be. And so occultists have come to believe this about the spear of destiny, and the power comes from the abyss. The power that flowed through that spear of destiny into Hitler came from the abyss.
And that was his truth.
And that was his truth. Yeah. And that was his truth.
As Jesus Christ in the beginning of his ministry had a forerunner in John the Baptist, so did this anti-Messiah, Hitler, had Dietrich Eckhart. In a series of seances, he claims that he had a satanic annunciation that he was destined to prepare the vessel for the Antichrist, the man who would inspire the world and lead the Aryan race to world conquest. Eckhart had a tremendous effect on Hitler, and he who first introduced Hitler to all the wealthy and powerful people he needed to make his crusade possible, including Henry Ford, who would later contribute vital financial support to the Nazi Party. From Eckhart, Hitler learned a great deal about the esoteric sciences. Eckhart is quoted as saying, "Follow Hitler, he will dance, but it is I who have called the tune. I have initiated him into the secret doctrine, opened his sinners in vision, and given him the means to communicate with the powers." Eckhart declared to his fellow conspirators, "Here is the one, for I was but the prophet and the forerunner." It was Eckhart who introduced Alfred Rosenberg to Adolf Hitler between 1920 and 1923. Eckhart and Rosenberg labored tirelessly in the service of Hitler and the party. During one of their seances, Alfred Rosenberg took it upon himself to question the ever-changing spirits which briefly occupied and possessed the medium, and it was Alfred Rosenberg, too, prophet of the Antichrist of the Protocols of Zion, who dared to call forth the presence of the beast of the Revelation, the Luciferic Leviathan, which had taken over body and soul of Adolf Hitler.
Dietrich Eckhart regularly organized seances with Hitler and with a select few other men of the Tool Society, and for the sole purpose of calling forth the spirit of Antichrist out of the abyss into Hitler. They wanted this. They wanted the spirit of Antichrist, this masterful or powerful spirit out of the abyss. They wanted that spirit to come and possess Hitler. They believed him to be Antichrist. Hitler believed himself to be Antichrist.
Adolf Hitler had already crossed the threshold into the experience of magic in his formative years in Vienna, when he achieved not only levels of higher consciousness, but also slipped through the veil of the senses to commune with the anti-spirit associated with the spear of destiny. Hitler was now ready to further prove his allegiance with the dark side and fully dedicate himself to the spirit that he wished to possess by one of the most sadistic rituals of all time. Historians have a hard time recognizing the connection of Hitler's hatred for mankind and his sexual deviancy or his attitude towards women. They fail altogether to understand that a monstrous sexual perversion took a central place in Hitler's life. A monstrous sexual perversion was the very core of his whole existence, the source of his mediumistic and clairvoyant powers, and the motivation behind every act through which he reaped a sadistic vengeance on humanity.
Now, we know for a fact that Hitler had one documented mistress prior to Eva Braun in the late 20s and early 30s, and she did in fact commit suicide. She supposedly, reportedly, killed herself with Hitler's pistol because Hitler would not pay enough attention to her. We know that Eva Braun herself, when she was just first started seeing Hitler, shot herself, tried to kill herself so he would take her on as his mistress. Then she tried to kill herself a second time because he wasn't paying enough attention to her. And then finally, reportedly, theoretically, any way you want to put it, she did kill herself after she was married to Hitler in the bunker at the end of World War II. She finally did commit suicide.
Dietrich Eckart maintained that Hitler was initiated into the sexual black magic of Aleister Crowley,
the most evil man on earth at the time. And this included what you would call a ritual castration.
It was at the home of the SS where the pagan rites and rituals took place, the Liebelsberg Castle, where Hitler would take part in this dark sexual rite. Hitler went so far as to identify himself to the sadistic king Klingsor, who went through this same castration. Klingsor, whom Hitler believed himself to be the reincarnation. Hitler became a sadomasochist, practicing various forms of sexual perversion. He was stimulated sexually by violence, brutality, and blood. Hermann Röchning, a friend of Hitler who later defected to the Allies, said of him, "Hatred is like wine to him, it intoxicates him. He had the instincts of a sadist, finding sexual excitement in torturing others." The form of ritual magic through which Dietrich Eckart further initiated Adolf Hitler was so similar to, and in part derived from, the horrible sexual magic of Aleister Crowley.
You had this whole side of the German Messiah with his mistress or mistresses that committed suicide. And this is very important because remember the passage in Daniel that said Antichrist would not desire the love of women?
Scholars have been perplexed at this because they don't know what it means. I mean, does it mean that he's gay? A lot of scholars have postulated that, but that's not it at all. And again, you have to understand witchcraft. There is a ritual that, when performed correctly, it psychologically castrates a person. Okay, psychologically, they could no longer have normal relations with women. All right, they no longer desire women as a normal man would desire his wife, or desire a woman. But the familiar spirits, the guiding spirits of Dietrich Eckart, who was the leader of this satanic society called the Tool Society, they told him he must perform this ritual because it would produce in Hitler the monstrous, sadistic hatred which he would really need, as he carried out his role, of Germany conquering the world and Germany committing genocide.
We believe with this satanic ritual that comes from Lucifer himself, Antichrist himself will also be initiated in this sexual black magic, which will result in mental castration, just as Hitler was.
This ritual would give Hitler the mental focus that would provide for him what every king desires, a kingdom to rule, and a throne to claim, and Hitler had a specific idea in mind how this would look. The rally site in Nuremberg would become an imitation to the altar of Zeus at Pergamus. Adolf Hitler commissioned Albert Speer to design his new throne based on the Pergamum altar on display at the Pergamum Museum in Berlin, Germany. Hitler said that he wanted to create a mass experience. The people would look onward at the columns of light streaming to the heavens to set the mood for a new spiritual awakening.
When he held these outdoor stadium meetings, he was holding a pagan ritual. All the elements were there, all the candles and the lighting and the singing and it was all done according to the old pagan rituals.
It was all part of the plan to set up a place where Satan could reach out to thousands of people in his vessel.
He was holding a satanic ritual in front of 80, 90, 100,000 people in these stadiums, and not only was he carrying the hearts of the people away in the stadium, but out through the radio, his voice was having the same effect of people who were listening to him. Germans who were listening to him. Not all, of course, but many of them. Hitler had developed a speech pattern which kind of mimicked the heat or the beat of the human heart, and it just really swept them away.
In Revelation it says, "I know where thou dwellest, even where Satan's seat is." In the Greek, the phrase "where Satan's seat is" literally means where a throne to Satan is. Ancient Pergamum was the center of pagan worship in Asia Minor, with the replica in full use in Nazi Germany. For the Nuremberg rallies, a new center for pagan worship is now in place.
Well, back in the olden days, the word pagan meant Satan. We've kind of diluted the meaning. Paganism meant Satan, and it was identical. It was a synonym. And so we've as a culture, we have diluted that meaning.
This must be taken in full consideration, that America is full of idols, what the Bible records as demons, that pervade our country with pagan worship. In 2008, months before the Democratic Convention, President Obama, as some would label a Messiah for America, visited the site of the Pergamum altar in Berlin, Germany. In return, his stage would be more identical than that of the Nuremberg rally site for Adolf Hitler. Islamic leader Louis Farrakhan would suggest when Obama talks, the Messiah is absolutely speaking. Barack Obama to me is a herald of the Messiah. Barack Obama is like the trumpet that alerts you something new, something better is on the way. In July of 2008, Obama gave yet another change speech under Germany's famous Victory Column. This was Hitler's favorite place for the Berlin Nazi rallies. The sight of Obama standing, arm outstretched, in that all too familiar gesture below the pagan goddess Victoria is certainly chilling enough, but not nearly as scary as what happened at his acceptance speech at the Democratic National Convention held in Denver, Colorado. There Obama gave his acceptance speech in front of a replica of the seat of Satan, the altar of Zeus. Like Hitler, who certainly was a true son of Satan, Obama chose to have a copy of the altar of Zeus as the backdrop for his acceptance speech. Thus, he knowingly chose the seat or throne of Satan to be the platform for accepting his role in the days ahead. Hitler, from his training of the Society of Jesus, learned what powered the rituals of the Catholic Church. He said the concluding meeting in Nuremberg must be exactly as solemnly and ceremonially performed as a service of the Catholic Church. At his podium with a godlike stature, it is said he would be descending down the steps like a tribune of the people from old Roman times, says Santoro. But just like the bronze bull was the place where sacrifices were made, a new altar has been built and a new sacrifice had to be made. Holocaust, a word that comes from the Greek, meaning a holy burnt animal sacrifice, and those inferior to the Aryan race were nothing more than animals in the eyes of Hitler, including real Bible-believing Christians. So important was the worship of Zeus in ancient Pergamus that perpetual sacrifices were offered to him upon the towering and famous 40-foot high altar. Antipas, the first leader and martyr of the early Christian church, is believed to have been slain on this altar, slowly roasting to death inside the statue of a bull, the symbol and companion of Zeus. Revelation 2:13 says, "Wherein Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you, where Satan dwelleth." Take a moment to think of the people that had accepted Hitler, had been trained for years to accept such a man without thinking twice. Have we been so cleverly duped?
Everything about this, from the blood and soil religion, to the organizations, to the prophets, to the high priest, now to the Messiah, everything about this whole situation was dark, satanic, and directed specifically by Lucifer, just as the actions of the true Antichrist in the future will also be.